of the simplest invertebrates that included sponges, ctenophores, and cnidarians. Now we get into, and we also talked about some examples of cnidaria. We get into the second group of invertebrates, which are called spirillans. Spirillans are Spirilia are a group of the protostomes, and then these are still being worked on. Their classification is still being worked on, which is the case in some of the very small protists and other types of organisms as well. Spirillans, which are also called as Lophotrochozoans, are divided into two main groups. Lophotrochozoa and Platyozoa are the two main groups. Within Lophotrochozoans, there are two other subgroups, which are called Lophophorans, and the other group is called Trochozoans. Lophophorans are not very commonly known. We probably you have not heard about any of them. Trochozoans are quite common, like molluscs and annelids and flatworms. Annelids like earthworms, molluscs, all different types of shelled organisms, flatworms that we have talked about. We have seen some of those actually during the lab also. So those all belong to the Trochozoans group. Some of them have a true coelom in the body. Other ones do not have a true coelom, so they have a pseudocoelom in the body. So they vary quite a bit. All of them actually have bilateral symmetry in the body, at least in some stage of their life. The Lophotrochozoans, and now we very quickly move to the Lophophorans. So Lophophorans contain a lophophore mouth with the kind of a ciliated type of with the ciliated and tentacle-like structure on their mouth, like this one. That's why they're called as Lophophorans. And so these are kind of a tube-like organisms that pretty much stay embedded underground most of the time in the soil or somewhere in the hiding all the time. Trochophores are free-living larvae with bands of cilia for the movement. So they're different stages of the life. Okay, so did not really spend much time on Lophotrochozoans and Lophophorans because these are not very commonly known. We'll start talking about molluscs, bivalves, and other types of organisms that are included in Lophotrochozoans. Molluscs that belong to phylum Mollusca, they contain snails, slugs, conchs, nudibranchs, clams, oysters, squids, octopuses, and all of those that have some type of hard shell in their body. And just like the clams, their body plan consists of three main body parts. Visceral mass that contains all their internal organs, mantle, which is the one that really makes the shell, the hard material, and the foot or muscle foot is adapted for locomotion. So in case of clams, we saw they actually kind of extends out, and clams use them for locomotion purposes. Molluscs have some type of a nervous system. They have a digestive system. They have a type of circulatory system in the body, even though they don't have any blood. But in place of blood, they have hemolymph, which is not the same material as blood. And the color of hemolymph is also not red, but more kind of a bluish type of material, which is because of hemocyanin. That's the body plan of a typical mollusk. So in this case here, the outermost structure is their shell, which is made with the help of mantle. So you can also see a very rudimentary type of heart, which is filled with hemolymph. Then their digestive system starts with the mouth and ends with the anus, so that way it is more like a complete digestive system that has two openings. On that we also see, like we saw in case of clams, we also see some muscles in their body that help them to locomote, to move. They have reproductive system that consists of the gonads, and then that radula are the teeth-like structure that are present in their mouths. So that helps them to break things or engulf things in their body. Though the teeth-like structures, they are not really meant for grinding, because this is just kind of a layer of those tiny teeth, but it's more designed for engulfing of things, hard material. Bivalves that have two parts of the shell, so it's divided into two flaps: clams, oysters, bivalves. And we have studied a little bit more with dissection of the clam. So they have the body parts again are the three main body parts in their body: mental, muscle foot, and their visceral mass are the three main structures of their body. Everything else is contained in them. And this one shows some of those internal anatomy of a clam, shows those very typical adductor muscle. There are two of those that actually keep the two valves together. Stays closed, and those muscles can relax to release and open the structure inside. Other structures are somewhat similar. You can see the gills shown here. These are the gills. And here's the foot. Their heart is there, and we have studied the structure before, so I'm not going to spend. Gastropods. These are some of those organisms like slugs and snails, conchs, and nudibranchs. So they have elongated and flattened foot. They generally have a single piece coiled shells. Their head region is very well developed. They have some form of a nervous system as well. They are called, these are gastropods. Gastropods mean stomach foot. So stomach foot organisms are these examples. These are some of the examples of snug snails and conchs. Quite opposite to gastropods are cephalopods. Cephalopods mean head foot. So instead of head, they have tentacles. So their head, in the form of those tentacles, help them to propel their body. So the two examples of the cephalopods, or head foot, are squids and octopus. So they are head-footed. They force water out of their mantle cavity for propulsion, and their tentacles and arms capture prey by attaching to those with secretions or with suckers. And inside their body, like we dissected actually octopus, they have a beak, which is a very strong structure. So they use those beaks to engulf, to break things before they eat. And some octopus or octopi or octopuses, they have shown some ability for learning. kind of a very limited amount of learning. Here are some of the examples of gastropods and cephalopods. So we see snails, and then we see these squids. At the bottom are the squids here. The examples of the cephalopods, and others are the examples of gastropods. Phylum Annelida contain those organisms that have their body in segments. So those segments are the one that actually divide body into units of function, which are very persistent throughout their body. Their body is fluid-filled coelom, and that helps it to kind of move through hydrostatic skeleton formation. They have a very developed digestive system, which is a complete. They have a closed circulatory system. Then they also have nerve cord. Most of these are marine, but what we know annelids are earthworms. So earthworms are not marine. These live in the soil, and these are the ones that break down organic matter for us. They are actually considered as very useful. Their movement is with the help of those tiny bristles, which are called as setae. Setae are those hair-like, tough hair-like structures which kind of extends from their body. Usually they have two pairs in each segment of their body. Okay, these are some of the characteristics of earthworms that have a very strong digestive system. Their secretory system, excretory system, is in the form of those nephridia. So the waste from their body is secreted from nephridia, which are present throughout their body. In each segment of the body has those nephridia. Earthworms are hermaphrodite, but they do go through conjugation with the two earthworms, which are hermaphrodite. Both of those are hermaphrodites, so they conjugate with each other. They deposit their gametes in each other, and that structure separates in the form of clitellum. So clitellum secretes mucus and it becomes hard material. So when it matures, then it is kind of slid off the body, and when it is deposited in the soil in the moist condition, it helps those tiny embryos to germinate. In their case, they don't really have any larval stage, so from the embryo, they very quickly become young adults. This just shows a cross section as well as some parts of the body of an earthworm. So it's showing some part of the digestive system that starts with their pharynx, their throat, and then esophagus, crop, and gizzard. Gizzard is more like their real stomach, and then the rest of the digestive system is in the form of intestine, which is used for absorption of the nutrients from the soil. And then at the bottom is a cross section of the earthworm that shows the interior part of the body, that shows very clearly some blood vessels, dorsal and ventral. Both of those are shown. So one is shown toward the top and other one is shown towards the bottom. The ventral one is present towards the bottom, but that's the one that actually makes their closed circulatory system. The excretory system, which is in the form of those nephridia, secretes these are the secretory pores through which all the waste products that are produced in their body are excreted from the body. And these are those bristle-like structures, the two pairs of CT on both sides. Those are the ones that actually help them to move. And then the interior part, which is their digestive system, is located right in the center of this organism. So, and these lines that I'm drawing around, those are the muscles of their intestine that help things to be propelled for excretion from the body. Other annelids that we are familiar with are found in freshwater, for example, leeches. A lot of us are familiar with them. The difference between earthworms and leeches is that leeches do not have any CT because they don't need them. They live in water, so they can swim quite well. But CT are designed for movement of the body because they can use those tiny bristles to attach and be propelled. So leeches have been used traditionally in medicine in the older times, and still sometimes now some doctors actually use them for the purpose of removal of any bad type of blood. Usually after surgery, if there is any contamination at the spot of the surgery or the stitches, then these leeches can be applied in those areas. They can actually suck all the blood from that area, and that helps in the healing process of the wound. Just trying to see if the video would work, but probably it's not going to work. I think I should just go up. Okay, the next group contains those platyzoans that are flatworms, like a planarian that belongs to Phylum Platyhelminthes. They have flat body, that's why they're called as flatworms. They do not have any special circulatory or respiratory structures. Their body contains no cavity, so these are the ones that are called ecoelom body, ecoelomated or acoelom body that don't have any cavity inside. Planarian lives in the freshwater. We actually do have them here in our state. They have a head which seems like an arrow-shaped structure that has auricles. Those are their sensory organs. They have two light-sensitive eye spots. They don't have real eyes in them, but those are kind of some sensitive cells that help them to become light-sensitive. They have muscular system in their body. They also have a kind of a which has some accumulation of the neurons that are called as ganglia that serve as a kind of a processing unit for their body. Their excretory system is also present. They can produce through asexual and asexual means both. Their asexual mean reproduction is a small piece of the body can actually grow into the mature organism. They generally are hermaphrodite, but they do practice cross-fertilization just like earthworms also. This slide shows different structures, different organ systems, or different systems of their body. It's just showing excretory system, digestive system. So they have just one opening. Their mouth and anus is the same. And then their reproductive system contains both male and female reproductive system. Then at the bottom is their nervous system, which seems to be fairly well designed and well organized for the size of, for such a small size of an organism. This one is taken from somewhere else to show a little bit more detail of their digestive system. So you can actually see the digestive system has both openings, mouth and anus, the same. And after that is a small kind of a throat-like area, which is called the pharynx. And then after pharynx is their intestine, where all the absorption takes place. And then it also shows their nervous system with the peripheral nerves. Ganglia are concentrated in the cephalized part of their body, which is in the interior of the body. And then other structures are not shown here. So the two members that we have seen in the lab, flukes and tapeworms, both are flat. Their body is very well designed. They have not, there is a loss of cephalization, meaning that their sensory organs are not located in the interior part of their body. So their interior part of the body is modified in the form of some type of suckers, because that's what they usually do. They are parasites, so they attach themselves to the interior part of the digestive system or other organs in the body and extract nutrients from the body. They stay attached to those areas for a long period of time. They are generally hermaphrodite, like blood flukes or liver flukes. They are hermaphrodite. This is just the life cycle of a blood fluke called Schistosoma. So this one starts with the penetration of the larva in the human. So they are small, so they can penetrate through the skin, and inside the body, male and female copulate in the bloodstream, in the blood vessels. Isn't that nice to know? And from there, the eggs that are produced after the copulation are moved to the digestive system. They are released on the outside, and the snails are considered as the secondary host. And at some point, those tiny larvae actually escape from the snails and found themselves in the water. So the contaminated water, when the humans touch that water, those larvae penetrate in their body and can move to humans and other mammals, and they live in their circulatory system, in the blood vessels. That's why they are called as blood flukes. They can actually become fairly large in size. Tapeworms are another pretty bad type of parasitic organism for humans and other organisms. They're called Taenia. And their body is divided into proglottids, kind of tiny sections that have both male and female parts in them, sex organs in the same proglottid. So those are basically just machines that produce more eggs, and they fertilize, and then the new organisms come from them. Taenia, or the pork tapeworm, uses humans as their primary host and the pig as a secondary host. So people who actually eat meat which is not properly cooked can infect humans. And they can stay in the form of cysts. Cysts are those structures in which the larvae are enclosed, and it becomes hard structure on the outside. It happens usually during that time when the conditions of nutrients and temperature is not very suitable, so they can stay as cysted organisms for long period of time, and they can emerge from those cysts whenever the conditions improve. Rotifers that belong to Phylum Rotifera, they are called as rotifers because of the crown of cilia that they have on the top, which is the corona, kind of a crown-shaped structure on the top of their body. They are very colorful. If you take some water from the ponds in the local area, you may be able to find actually some of those. We have actually seen them several times whenever we collect water from the ponds in our area. They look pretty neat. They are small in size, and the corona, looks like as if it's a rotary wheel because of the presence of those tiny cilia there. When they move in a very coordinated way. So under microscope, it appears as if they. So this is a typical rotifer. We can actually see the mouths, which is covered with this corona that has those tiny cilia. So when they move, it gives the appearance as if the wheel-like structure is moving. We are moving on to the third group, which consists of organism that belongs to the group called Ecdysozoans. So ecdysis means stripping off. So these are those organisms that construct and remove their outer covering, which is called the cuticle. So they replace their outer covering like arthropods or insects. They remove, they change. They go through metamorphosis in which they grow from smaller size, since they are made of a hard covering or cuticle or hard structure made of exoskeleton. So they remove those. That's why they're called as Ecdysozoans. They protect and support, so their cuticle, the outer covering, protects themselves, but they can change them through molting by replacement of those older ones. As they grow, the size, when the body size increases, that cuticle becomes short. They become small, so they replace that from time to time. Ecdysozoans include roundworms and arthropods. They have developed, male and female as separate sexes. Belong to phylum Nematode, or these are nematodes. So their body is non-segmented, pretty flat in that regard. They are colorless, they are smaller in size. Some of those are parasitic. Other ones are free-living, not parasitic. Like, a lot of nematodes live free in the soil, and they eat bacteria and microorganisms. C. elegans, which is the commonly known nematode that you might have heard in SpongeBob also. So it has been used as a model system in genetics and in developmental biology because their whole body consists of less than 1,000 cells. So they are pretty neat. Then parasitic roundworms like Ascaris, the one that we saw in the lab, and you dissected that, the male and female are separate. They produce a large number of eggs daily. Those are just egg machines. Trichinella that causes trichinosis. When people actually catch those trichinella and develop trichinosis because of eating meat from pork, which is not very well prepared. So those worms stay in them and get transferred to the humans when they consume that meat. Filaria worms, those are called heartworms. They cause fatalities in the dogs. These are tiny, very long type of roundworms, and they can completely block the circulatory system or the heart. Wuchereria or elephantiasis that causes accumulation of the fluid in the body, in different parts of the body like legs. So those are transmitted through mosquitoes. They use mosquitoes as a vector to transmit this disease to the humans. Pinworms, some people have probably experienced those pinworms, are the tiny worms which are roundworms that are usually found in So here are some examples. In this case here on the left side is Ascaris that has male and female. Females are generally much bigger and males are much smaller as compared to the females. Round in the middle is the Trichinella, which is found in the muscles of the pig. So in this case here, it is actually showing enclosed inside that cyst. So it is a cysted organism in this case here. And they are very well protected when they develop those cysts. So if the meat is not very properly cooked at appropriate temperature, then they can persist. They can stay inside, and when the consumption, the environment has changed, so they become alive there. They become activated again and cause a lot of damage. On the right side is the filarial worm that causes elephantiasis. So what that organism does is actually it kind of clogs the lymphatic vessels. When lymphatic vessels are clogged, then the fluid that should drain back towards the circulatory system accumulates, and that causes the swelling of the parts of the body. And most of the time, those people who actually develop this, they lose their limbs. They have to be amputated. Arthropods, the last group of very large group. Arthropods belong to Phylum Arthropoda. They are characterized by exoskeleton. Their body is segmented, and their body consists of 3 parts: head, thorax, and abdomen. They have a very well developed nervous system. They have very well developed respiratory system, and digestive system, muscular system. So they are pretty advanced in terms of their development. They have very different types of respiratory organs in them: gills or book lungs or tracheae. They go through metamorphosis, that change from the larval stage towards the adult stage. As they grow bigger, the older shells are shed and the newer shells are developed. So this slide just showing different parts of arthropods, and this slide showing the molting process in which the new organism is coming out of this old shell. So this is the old shell that is being replaced. So this organism is coming out of the old shell and looks pretty fresh. And usually they are lighter in color. The color change with the development of the new shell around them. When they come out, they usually don't have the new shell on them, and it develops later. Crustaceans, which are part of this group, crustaceans like crayfish that we saw in the lab. The name is given because of the crusty exoskeleton, which is made of calcium carbonate and chitin. So they are pretty hard-shelled. They have compound eyes with 5 pairs of appendages. Majority of them live in aquatic environment. Some of them are called decapods and others are called copepods. Decapods have 10 legs. This is what we are mostly familiar with, like crabs and lobsters and shrimps, and copepods are the ones that have 4 feet, like barnacles and krills. Those are tiny shrimp-like, as if they are tiny smaller shrimps. Those are called krills. These are some of the examples of crustaceans, like crabs and crayfish and barnacles, which are copepods, and krill at the bottom, as if they are small shrimp. Crayfish that some of you actually dissected and saw some internal anatomy of those. They have very typical type of structures: reproductive system, muscular system, nervous system, respiratory, digestive system. All of those are found in these organisms. So I don't want you to spend actually much more time than that on them. Centipedes means hundreds of legs. Those are 100-leggers. And millipedes mean thousands of legs. So centipedes and millipedes we do see actually inside the houses. Their body segments have many, they are segmented organisms like other ecdysozoans. So in this case, the centipedes, they have each body segment has a pair of walking legs. They live in moist environments, and their appendages are a little bit modified. The first appendages become jaws that are used to kill or immobilize prey. Millipedes, they have 4 thoracic segments, each have 1 pair of legs. Their abdominal segments have 2 pairs of legs. They have cylindrical bodies. They are tough, chitinous exoskeleton. They secrete hydrogen cyanide. So hydrogen cyanide can be used to find their prey and immobilize their prey. So hydrogen cyanide is more like poison. They may bite humans but have no stingers in them. So they don't sting like bees and wasps. These are centipedes and millipedes. Centipedes have only a pair of appendages on almost every segment of their body, and then millipedes have 2 pairs of legs on each segment of their body. So some of you might have seen this organism inside the house. They don't look very pleasant. If you see them, they look really very threatening, even though they are not really threatening. But those are also some type of centipedes. Their body is divided into 3 parts: head, thorax, and abdomen, just like most of the other crustaceans. So mostly live on land, and their thorax bears 3 pairs of legs. That's what really distinguishes them from other crustaceans. They have 3 pairs of legs versus 5 pairs of legs. And they generally have 1 or 2 pairs of wings as well. Most of the internal organs are contained in the abdomen. And then they breathe by tracheae. Tracheae are the tiny tubes inside the body. So the air goes inside the body through tiny spiracles. Those are tiny holes on the sides of the insects. And tracheae are internal tubes that divide and divide further into smaller and smaller tubes, and they divide to the level where the gas exchange takes place. They divide into smaller and smaller tubes to the point where exchange of gases can take place from the cells. Many insects undergo through complete metamorphosis, and some of them actually go through incomplete metamorphosis, where different stages are not completely or dramatically different from each other. So complete metamorphosis is in which complete reorganization of their body parts take place. Like from pupa, from larva it becomes pupa, and from pupa it becomes a young adult, which is completely different than the pupal stage. So insects are a good source. They're a very important part of the food web, and they are a source of food for many other grasshopper, what we dissected in the lab. So it has 3 pairs of legs for jumping. The last pair of leg, the third pair of leg, is very muscular and much enlarged as compared to the other 2 pairs of the legs. They bear tympanum, which is kind of a more like a sensitive organ for catching sound waves. They have excretory system, circulatory system, and they go through incomplete metamorphosis. There is a gradual change in form, not dramatic change like we see in other insects, but the smaller grasshoppers are just miniaturized adult forms of grasshoppers. They breathe through spiracles also that divide into tracheae, which divide further into smaller tubes, and the gas exchange takes place in the finest divisions of tracheae. There are some diverse insects here. We see mealybugs. Those are kind of pests of plants. They destroy plants, so they are not really liked by the people who do gardening. Right in the middle are Hymenoptera. Those are the members of kind of a wasp family that have a stinger that can cause a lot of pain to the people. Then there are beetles and leafhoppers and dragonflies and head louse. People actually develop those. Those are also parasitic that suck blood from the skin of the people. Callistrates are ecdysozoans that live in many diverse types of environments. These include spiders, scorpions, tick mites, crabs, and sea spiders. Their appendages are attached to cephalothorax, which is a kind of a fused form, and none of those are found in the abdomen. So it's kind of one structure which results from the fusion of the thorax and the head part. That's kind of collectively called as cephalothorax. The first pair are called chelicerae, and those are usually designed for feeding and defense mechanism. So they are much enlarged as compared to the rest of the appendages. Then the second pair, which is called as pedipalp, they function in the feeding or sensory system. So this structure shows the pedipalp in case of a spider, and chelicerae are the first pair of appendages. Pedipalps are usually the second one, and this is the stinger. On the back of their body is the stinger, not found in all organisms, but in this case of scorpions, it is pretty obvious, and sometimes it looks pretty threatening too. And the ones actually that sting can cause a lot. Now we move on to deuterostome. So the only example of deuterostome which are invertebrate are the ones which are called as echinoderms. They belong to Phylum Echinodermata. These are invertebrates. Deuterostomes, examples are sea stars, sea urchins, sea cucumber, and sea sand dollars. You might have actually collected some sand dollars when you were little on the beach. Those are actually just coin-like flat structures. They have a radial symmetry as adults, but when they are younger, they may have bilateral symmetry in them. Their exoskeleton is hard, calcium-rich plates, and the reason they are called as echinoderms are those tiny spines that are found on their exoskeleton. their central nerve ring, they have a central nerve ring with the branches that distribute, with the branches that is part of their nervous system. And for locomotion, they use a vascular system. The internal structure is in the form of tubes, including a central circular tube-like structure that they use to pump water in. The movement of water in and out of their body kind of is reflected to the outside of the body in the tiny feet. So the vascular system, water which is internally connected. The top part of their body, the dorsal side of the body, has this opening which is called their anus. This is where the refuse of the digestive system comes from. Internally, they have pretty nice stomach. So that stomach can actually go outside their body through the mouth, which is located on the ventral side of the body, towards the lower side of the body. So you will see them somewhere there. So anus on one side and mouth on the other side. Then they have gonads, which are quite extensive in all the part of their body. And then they also have a digestive gland, so which are very obvious inside the body. And the bottom side has those tiny feet, which are called tube feet, which are quite extensive inside the body. These were actually, in the previous slide, those were some of the members of echinoderms. One was the sea apple, has nothing to do with apple. It looks like somewhat like apple. Then sea urchin is very common. The people who actually have small aquariums, they usually keep sea urchins so that they can eat all the algae. They are the cleaners, the walls of the aquarium that grows that green algae. Sea urchins actually attach to those walls and clean them because that's their food. And that's pretty much it for the chapter number 28. These are some of the questions parts. So questions mean some part of the chapter that are important. So I have given those sections in the form of questions.